Iraq is hardly the country that comes to mind when most people think of international trade. Yet, thanks to some strategic partnerships and a massive $17 billion investment, that may soon change. For 150 years, trade between Europe and Asia has relied on passage through the Suez Canal and Egypt. Iraq plans to change that, and simultaneously, transform world trade as we know it. A bold new project. The Suez Canal has been the backbone of international trade since it was first constructed in the mid-1960s. It has also made Egypt an astounding sum of money in transport fees, docking charges, hotels, and more. Iraq, now enjoying a broader sense of stability than it has for a century, has a bold plan to follow Egypt's lead, or rather, supplant their position. It's being called the Iraq Development Road, an ambitious infrastructure initiative launched by the Iraqi government. With an estimated cost of $17 billion, the massive project plans to connect a major port on Iraq's southern coast to Turkey's border through an extensive network of roads and railways. It would be the Suez Canal on wheels. And while that may sound a bit far-fetched, technology is not what it was 150 years ago. In fact, many experts argue that this approach could prove faster, more efficient, and cheaper, providing it's done right, and for the right reasons. After all, the project is not just a work of international benevolence, it's about modernizing Iraq's transport network, which has been ravaged by decades of war and economic instability. More importantly, it's a strategic move to diversify Iraq's economy and create a sustainable non-oil revenue stream. Indeed, over the past 5 years, many oil-producing countries have made similar shifts in policy, with places like the UAE and Saudi Arabia pivoting to tourism. Since Iraq doesn't currently have the sort of reputation that will bring tourists running, finding a way to profit from trade seemed like the next best thing. Still, the move is not likely to earn the new Iraqi government many friends. Its desire to compete directly with the Suez Canal will not only siphon money from Egypt, but also enhance the country's geopolitical influence. During a recent summit, Iraqi officials emphasized that Iraq seeks to regain its pivotal political role in the region, as well as its economic significance. If the Iraq Development Road, which is already being called the Iraqi Silk Road, is a success, it could generate $4 billion annually and create at least 100,000 jobs. But it will likely ruffle some feathers as well. The history of the Suez Canal. To grasp the audacity of Iraq's plan, it is essential to understand the immense significance of the Suez Canal. Everyone alive today has always lived in a world where the canal existed, so it's forgivable that not everyone understands just how dramatically it changed the world, and why countries have been so willing to fight over it. The beginning of trade between Asia and Europe represents one of the most important stepping stones into globalization. However, for most of its history, traders were just as likely to die at sea as they were to get rich selling luxuries from the Orient. Before the canal was built, ships had to navigate around the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope, to travel between the two regions. This route was not only significantly longer, but far more dangerous for the ships and their crews. The Suez Canal was designed as a direct maritime shortcut, connecting the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea by moving roughly 193 kilometers of earth between the Sinai Peninsula and mainland Egypt. This would drastically reduce the distance ships needed to travel, cutting the journey by several weeks and significantly lowering the costs and time involved in maritime trade. More importantly, it was safe. At just 200 feet wide, ships would never be far from shore, safety, and a warm meal. The canal's construction involved a massive labor force, including tens of thousands of Egyptian workers, many of whom were conscripted. As was emblematic of the time, the harsh working conditions, diseases, and accidents led to significant loss of life throughout the project. Estimates put this figure at around 120,000, enough to technically classify the canal's construction as a global tragedy. But there was triumph too. Despite a decade of challenges, the canal quickly became a vital trade route. This not only boosted Egypt's economy through toll revenues, but also attracted substantial foreign investment. And where there is money to be made, there is often conflict. Initially, the canal was operated by the Suez Canal Company, with shares owned by French and Egyptian interests. However, the canal's control shifted in 1875 when the British government purchased all of the Egyptian shares. This move gave Britain substantial control over the canal, further cementing its importance in global trade. At a time when colonialism was still fresh on the minds of many people in Africa and the Middle East, this was seen as a huge affront by the Egyptian government. So, in 1956, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the canal, leading to the Suez Canal crisis. Despite its name, this was more or less a war. The UK, France, and Israel formed a pact in which the latter would invade Egypt while the two European powers intervened. Though, from the outside, they would appear to be protecting the canal, they would instead be regaining control of it. But the UN, particularly the United States, was having none of it. The US even threatened to destabilize the British economy by selling off its reserves of the British pound. In the end, Israel withdrew its troops, and the United Nations Emergency Force was deployed to oversee the withdrawal and maintain peace. Since then, the canal has remained entirely and undisputedly in the hands of Egypt. So, rather than attempt to seize the canal, why not simply build something better? Iraq takes a lesson from history. While it proved to be an economic windfall for Egypt, most Middle Eastern nations have had a complex relationship with the canal. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq have indeed benefited from the canal's existence, but those benefits have been very unevenly distributed. While Egypt enjoyed significant direct revenue, increased foreign investment, and major infrastructure development, other nations saw milder, more indirect benefits. Meanwhile, the largest ships were paying tolls of up to $500,000 in 2022, money that went directly into Egypt's coffers. As a result, many of these nations have quietly discussed bypassing or, in some cases, challenging the canal's supremacy for decades. However, it wasn't until April 2023 that a comprehensive plan was announced. During Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan's visit to Baghdad, an agreement was signed to develop what the two parties simply referred to as a new trade corridor. A month later, the details of this bold trade infrastructure plan were finally unveiled. To the shock of people around the world, the plans represented the most ambitious announcement in the Middle East since the canal's opening 150 years ago. The new Suez Alternative would build roads and railways from the Persian Gulf all the way to Europe, connecting the oil-rich south of Iraq through the country and across the Turkish border. The stakes are colossal, as are the logistics. Not only would the new route enable shipping companies to bypass the exorbitant tolls of the Suez Canal, but it would allow Iraq to reclaim its historical role as a major trade hub once again. The plan in detail. As previously mentioned, the Iraq Development Road project is a multifaceted plan to transform both Iraq's infrastructure and economy. The project will begin at the southern tip of the Faw Peninsula, where the Grand Faw Port is currently being developed. This is no small feat in and of itself, as the port is set to be one of the largest in the world. In fact, it has been designed to handle over 99 million tons of cargo annually, including container shipments, bulk cargo, and oil exports. Despite delays, significant progress has been made on the port, including the construction of the world's largest breakwaters and basic infrastructure such as docks, berths, and quays. With a price tag close to $5 billion, it's clear that Iraq intends the Grand Faw Port to serve as the new gateway to Europe. Beyond the port itself, the Development Road project includes the creation of an entirely new freeway system. Unlike the country's severely outdated Freeway 1, this new freeway will feature up to 6 lanes and will include a variety of modern amenities such as comprehensive signage, lighting systems, and surveillance systems like speed cameras. More importantly, Iraq plans to install a bevy of service stations, rest areas, hotels, and restaurants, all intended to make long-distance travel more feasible and comfortable. It's a modern highway system akin to anything one might see in Europe or the US, and that's precisely the point. If Iraq is going to rebrand itself as the safe, new economic hub of the Middle East, it needs to present itself accordingly. Ensuring that a ride through central Iraq feels like a leisurely drive through the American Midwest is a huge part of capturing that image. Still, the true centerpiece of the project is the new rail system, which will run parallel to the freeway. The 2-track system will significantly enhance Iraq's freight transport capabilities and is projected to carry 22 million tons of cargo annually. More importantly, it will be able to do so faster, cheaper, and more efficiently than the Suez Canal. There will also be passenger trains, which the Iraqi government hopes will revolutionize Iraqi train travel with onboard luxuries such as Wi-Fi and high-end dining services. Most importantly, the new train will reduce travel time from Basra to Baghdad from 12 hours to just 2, dramatically improving the current system. If successful, the project will be the largest single leap in train speed any nation has ever witnessed. The new passenger train is projected to carry 13 million passengers per year, transforming travel for millions of Iraqi citizens who currently rely on slow trains, buses, or poorly maintained roadways. But while it will have clear benefits for Iraq's citizens, it remains to be seen whether the Iraq Development Road project will truly be able to knock the Suez Canal off its international trading pedestal. Competing with the canal. Indeed, the carrying capacity of Iraq's new rail system is far less than the Suez Canal's 500 million tons. That said, its ability to offer a faster and potentially cheaper alternative could prove attractive to many shipping companies. And despite Iraq's current reputation on the international stage, it's important to remember that it is not the only country pushing for this project. The Cooperation Agreement for the Development Road project, which was signed in April 2024, includes significant funding from Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. Clearly, these partnerships are crucial for the project's success, as they provide financial support, regional cooperation, and a sense of stability that foreign governments outside the Middle East will appreciate. Despite the promising outlook, Iraq faces formidable challenges in realizing this ambitious project. Corruption remains a significant issue, with decades of sanctions and conflict contributing to widespread dishonesty across both public and private sectors. Effectively and transparently allocating $17 billion for a multi-phase infrastructure project will be a major challenge, as will avoiding bribery and other issues commonly associated with construction projects in the region. In addition to corruption, Iraq faces stiff competition from other countries with similar ambitions. Indeed, China and India are both working on their own new Silk Road projects. These also aim to create trade corridors between Asia and Europe, but would completely bypass Iraq. India's proposed corridor in particular runs through Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Its construction would only serve to boost the bankrolls of these already wealthy neighbors, leaving Iraq at a disadvantage. Security concerns also pose a significant challenge. Although Iraq has experienced a period of relative stability in the past few years, ongoing security issues could impact the project's progress and its perceived safety. Despite these challenges, the potential benefits of the Iraq Development Road project are enormous. If successful, the project could create 100,000 new jobs and generate $4 billion annually, providing a significant boost to Iraq's GDP, which was just under $265 billion in 2022. Ultimately, the Development Road project represents a transformative vision for the country's future. By creating a modernized network of roads and railways, Iraq aims to compete with the Suez Canal and establish itself as a major transit hub between Asia and Europe. What remains to be seen is if shipping companies and foreign governments will trust billions of dollars in cargo to an unproven system from a previously unstable government. It's also unclear how Egypt plans to react to this clear challenge to its global trade superiority. After all, wars have been waged over far less.